Something that's been on my mind recently is what I would consider to be an unhealthy deference to local authority and authority in general in England, particularly in the cases of homelessness decisions, where effectively I'm seeing a lot of professionals hear a council say, oh, they've got no local connection, or oh, they're intentionally homeless, and that professional essentially just accepts that as if it's gospel. And the fact is it's not. The fact is councils break the law regularly, every day across the country. Hundreds of thousands of people get left homeless every year because of it. If you don't believe me, just Google Brentwood Council Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman report, which details an investigation they recently published in January 2025, which showed that in 90% of the cases they investigated, they were treated unlawfully, which is insane. And the good news is that would be a really good area if you work in this sector to start targeting to get them to actually follow the law, because I doubt the Ombudsman's report in itself is probably going to make that much lasting change. It would need people on the ground in Brentwood to continue to challenge them in order to get that kind of lasting impact. But I guess I just wanted to talk about the way the law is designed. I'm not a lawyer. I've never studied law. I studied data protection law, but that's another thing. But I've never studied this kind of area of law. I've learned stuff from the Ombudsman's website, sites like Nearly Legal, lots of textbooks, that sort of thing, and just applying it over the last 12 years and effectively learning as I went, basically. So that's kind of why I know what I know, and there are certainly some gaps in my knowledge. But I just wanted to talk about the fact that the law itself is supposed to be adversarial, and that makes a lot of professionals poo their pants, basically, it seems. The idea that the way that justice is delivered is the local authority present the best legitimate argument that they don't have a duty, and then the homeless person is supposed to present the strongest argument that there is a duty. Now, obviously, homeless people are going to be in a pretty bad position to read a textbook, apply the law, and kind of make that argument themselves. But as professionals, we are certainly able to do that. But what happens is, first of all, the arguments that councils often make are completely illegitimate. So, they're already cheating, and no one pushes back effectively on them. And as I say, it's supposed to be the way it works. There is supposed to be an argument and a counter argument, and there's supposed to be this tussle, because in the middle of that is where the just outcome is somewhere. And so I guess I just wanted to kind of highlight that and just kind of make it clear that you are allowed to challenge councils. That is supposed to be the way it works. If a council gets on its high horse because someone's challenging them, that is a red flag if ever there was one. They should not be in any way reluctant to get challenged from partners. The reality is, of course, is that many charities won't rock the boat. That's the kind of language they'll often use. I speak to a lot of professionals around the country. They don't want to rock the boat because they feel that if they push back in that argument, they will lose their funding. And in some cases, that's absolutely true. They will do. Some councils are run by some pretty nasty people and unjust people who will essentially penalise organisations who actually do a good job and fight for the rights of their clients. But that's just a reality we have to deal with. The only alternative is that charities and organisations collude with that unlawfulness from councils, and they essentially become part of the problem that they're supposed to be fighting against. And so we have to kind of come to terms with this idea that it is supposed to be adversarial. And I would say, and I appreciate this is probably going to upset even more people than normal, is that if you work in the sector for any length of time and you've never challenged a council through either the complaints process or the Section 202 review process, then I don't know quite what you're doing. Now, again, I don't mean to make people who actually really do care about the work they're doing kind of feel bad about that. It's just meant to be an inspiration to say it's okay to go do that. So next time you have a situation where you can see a council's acted unlawfully, just bear in mind you can use the complaints process or you can use the Section 202 review process to get a better outcome. But for a lot of people, and particularly managers of charities, now again, this is probably not in my interest to say this, but I don't care, I'll say it anyway. A lot of managers and charities have never actually made the challenge themselves in their career. So effectively, they'll often be in a situation where they won't support their frontline workers. Let's say a frontline worker actually went ahead and made a complaint or raised an issue robustly, as they should do. As I'd say, they have a moral obligation to do so. They won't be backed up by their manager, because I'll give an example. When I worked in the local drug and alcohol service in Bedford, so after whistleblowing at Bedford Borough Council, I went to work in a local organisation which was polar opposite from the council. I loved it there, really good people, a lot of expertise. I learnt an awful lot. And in the course of doing that stuff, by this point we've set Just Us up. So I was coming across people on duty in the drug and alcohol service where I was like, you're homeless, it's going to be very difficult for you to stop using your drugs and alcohol if you're still homeless, so I'm going to focus on getting you housed, and had a very good success rate with doing that. But before long, my boss got a call from Bedford Borough Council, some senior officer. I don't actually know who it was. It's one of two people, basically. And basically tried to apply pressure on my boss to essentially either stop me doing it or potentially even try and take disciplinary action against me. Now, fortunately, my boss was great, absolute legend, the best person I've ever worked for, who basically had my back in that situation. But I was lucky then to have such a good boss. I think most bosses won't do that. And this is difficult for frontline workers because, yeah, it makes you very exposed if you're going to challenge this sort of conduct. There are a couple of things I'd say that you can do to reduce that risk. So one is, and this is what I started doing at the Drug and Alcohol Service just to kind of keep the heat off me, I'd write the letters. So someone come in, they're homeless, I'd say, right, okay, here's a letter. I'd write a letter for them which says, this is what you need to tell the council. Have a look at it. This is what it all means. If you're happy with it, sign it. Let's send it off. And that actually resulted in people getting compensation just by doing it that way. So you can always find a different way of doing it. I think the key thing is that you try and find a way of doing it. I think there are professionals who effectively give up very soon in that process, and that's not going to do the job basically. If you give up early on in the process, or even if you give up quite a way down the process, you don't get a good outcome. It's not until you show the council that you're willing to do these legitimate things, like like complain, like do a Section 202 review, like raise the safeguarding alert against an officer if that's what's warranted. Then they're going to start taking your future applications much more seriously. But yeah, as I say, I'm probably waffling a bit here. But just to say, if you work in a sector, it's okay to be adversarial with a local authority when they're breaking the law. That's all right. If they're advancing an argument, which isn't, it might not even be that outrageous what they're saying, but if they've got something wrong, then it's completely legitimate to challenge that through the existing process. And yes, that's going to open you up to some risk in terms of your future employment. Okay, yep, I can't argue with that. My career prospects were not helped at all by the career path I've taken. I've had to work into very low paid positions along the way. I now work as a painter and decorator to make ends meet. That's just the way it has to be. But I know that I'm part of the solution, and that might seem really arrogant to say, but I know people who I know my intervention was the thing which got them housed, and that might be after many years of being homeless. And that means I don't have to carry around that tension that comes from knowing that you could do something but you don't. Now obviously I'm going a bit off piece from what I normally do videos about, and I'm just kind of playing around with kind of ways of articulating this. So as I say, my intention here is not to make decent people feel worse. If you're a decent worker, if you care about the rights and the kind of situations that your clients are in, I don't want this to make you feel any worse about it. But certainly in my journey, and maybe I should do a video about that at some point, my journey of working in the sector, being very much a suit and kind of on that kind of career path of kind of going up the ladder, there were a few things that happened on that journey which basically jolted me into reality. And actually one of them was reading a book called The Lucifer Effect, which was done by Philip Zimbardo, who did the Stanford Prison Experiment. It's actually a very detailed account of the Stanford Prison Experiment and some other stuff he did around a later kind of campaigning that he did. But for me, that book just brought a very straightforward challenge that systemic issues are not caused by bad apples. They're basically caused by everyone in that system colluding with the bad practice. And it kind of just puts this kind of onus in saying, if you don't do something about that, then who is going to do something about that? And that was kind of, again, it was one of the key things which I think happened in that journey away from that career path of becoming a chief exec or whatever that was probably on the cards. So yeah, as I say, I don't want to make good people feel worse. I do want to challenge people who aren't doing good, who do know this stuff happens, who don't put their head above the parapet. I don't suggest that you just kind of run off and start sticking your head above the parapet willy-nilly. I think you do need to be strategic about it. The only reason I'd say whistleblowing at Bedford Borough Council was worth it is that we have seen this increase in temporary accommodation capacity, this massive increase. We have seen things improve. But for the first 3 or 4 years of doing that, I didn't think I was going to win. I didn't think it was going to be successful, and that will absolutely destroy your soul at that point. So this is horrible if you're going to do it on your own or with a small number of people. So as I say, it's not something you should jump into in terms of kind of doing this sort of stuff. So going as far as whistleblowing or something like that is not something that should be taken lightly. But certainly challenging these individual decisions which are bad, which are poorly conceived, which are legally incorrect, that has to be something that the sector does. That can't be something which is seen as radical to expect a government to follow its own rules. So that would be a sad state of affairs if that's the country we now live in, where literally it's seen as being radical to expect local government to follow the law. That's nuts. So yeah, hopefully we're not quite there yet. And hopefully with good people around the country all pushing back on local councils, we're actually going to see homelessness genuinely start getting sorted out. If you're waiting for the Ministry of Housing and Local Government to sort homelessness out, you're going to be waiting a very long time. If you worked in the sector for any length of time, you will know that there have been plenty of broken promises over the years, and they will continue to be broken promises, because the solution does not lie, I think, with the big charities and with central government. It relies on local community members to push back on their local council to get them following the law. That will lead to a very significant reduction in homelessness if it was done across the board. So yeah, as I say, I'm playing around with how to articulate this. I appreciate I'm probably sounding very ranty at the moment. I appreciate your feedback about, you know, what you think I could say better, or kind of how I could say it in a more constructive way. But yeah, I'm hoping it's food for thought, if nothing else. And as I say, there have been things which, along my journey of getting to this point, people would challenge things I was doing, and I kind of allowed that to kind of change my practice. And again, I could do some interesting videos about that in terms of how I got from that position of thinking that the charity I worked for was God's gift and was brilliant and was doing a great job, through to now where I kind of look back and I wince at what I was doing and just think, okay, I probably did more harm than good. Which is sad, because a lot of the people I knew back in the night shelter in Bedford in 2005 onwards are now passed away, and I just wonder, yeah, had I been doing something different, had we been doing something different, maybe we'd have some more positive impact on all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's again maybe another video there. But yeah, as I say, I'm hoping that's been helpful. I want it, yeah, just to reiterate one more time, I want this to be an encouragement and a kind of more of an inspiration to people to go and start challenging councils more effectively, rather than crushing people who are actually already doing their best. So yeah, I need to get better at explaining that without being too ranty, but I'll get there. So yeah, thanks very much for listening.